Good morning. Thank you for spending your Saturday morning with us. I'm sure you're all very excited about the CPF panel here. The topic of CPF is very near and dear to every Singapore citizen and PR's hearts, and it's also something that we often get asked by our clients. So here are some fun facts about CPF, if you don't know already. There are 4.5 million CPF members as of June of this year. $556 billion in CPF balances, and about actually $31 billion in CPF OA and SA is invested. And just for 3 months, specifically from April to June of this year, there was an inflow of $12.1 billion. So that's the kind of numbers that we're talking about. So today we have 3 panelists here. You're already familiar with these panelists and their faces. They're quite famous, I think. Gerald, Geraldine, and Tim. So to kick it off, maybe if you could just introduce yourself very briefly and talk about the life stage that you're in, maybe the age group that you're in, and if you're comfortable sharing a little bit about your personal circumstances. It doesn't have to go into details, but so that the audience can understand and kind of relate to where you are.
Okay, I'll go first. So I'm Timothy, so I'm co-founder of DollarsAndSense, so it's a finance website. Some of you may have read some of our articles. I've been doing it full-time for about 8 years. So currently, I'm married, 3 kids, so my oldest is actually there, 6 years old. And yeah, there's another 2 younger girls as well. So, I'm pretty much in the sandwich generation as well, meaning that I have elderly parents as well that live very close to us as well. So that's currently my life stage, yeah.
Geraldine?
Hi everyone, really glad to be here. So if some of you have some issues pronouncing my family name, is actually Phneah, so you can think of it as like Tau Sa Phneah Po Phneah. So that's the best way I get people to remember my last name. So a little bit about myself. So I'm a content creator, and I create content around how millennials can actually accelerate our growth while staying balanced. So topics I cover would include work, money, well-being, and anything that is actually relevant to those who are in my age range. In my day job, of course, I worked in the software as a service industry, so I'm in tech sales. Right now, I'm at a Series D AI market intelligence startup that is actually headquartered in the US, but we're helping to launch their APAC office here. A little bit more about myself, I guess. I'm not blessed with children yet, like Timothy, but hopefully soon one day. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Gerald. I'm the founder of Beansprout. Like DollarsAndSense, we are a financial insights platform to help you make better financial decisions. Prior to starting Beansprout, I was actually working in a bank for about 12 years. The bank is no longer in existence, but part of one of the platinum partners today. So when I was there, I was fortunate to be able to actually build my retirement savings, and with that actually leave the firm about like 2 years ago to start Beansprout, so as to be able to help more retail investors actually make better financial decisions. So at this point in time, I'm about to hit 40, not married, and because I just started this business, just being able to have the peace of mind to do what I want to be doing, to be able to live in line with what my values and beliefs are, is actually something that is very important.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being very open with us today. So maybe we'll start off with the first question, and this will be for all 3 panelists. Why should the average person care about CPF and SRS? And what's the big picture benefit for everyday Singaporean? Who would like to start first? Maybe Tim?
I'll go first.
Yes.
I think the average person has a lot of money in their CPF savings, right? Whether they know about it or whether they don't know about it, right? For many people, the first time we think about CPF saving in Singapore is typically when you need to buy a HDB flat, whether it's on the resale market or you go to the Toa Payoh and then you buy a BTO flat. That's where you realize, oh, okay, I actually have this amount of money in my OA, and thankfully I have the money in my OA because now I can pay the down payment and I don't have to fork out so much cash. So clearly, CPF saving is a very important part of our investment, of our portfolio that we may or may not see. And the next time, for a lot of other older Singaporeans, when they'll think about it is when they're about to retire. And that's where they would typically, I mean, I have both my parents are using their CPF savings for their retirement now. And typically, they will only know about their CPF savings when they're about to reach retirement. They just see how much they have, and then someone in the CPF office will tell them, okay, this is how much payout you would have. But in between, there's about 40 years time gap, right, from the time you start working till the time you retire, age 65, which you may not do a lot of things about it, but just by optimizing your returns a little bit, you can actually get a much higher return. So I think that is why CPF savings is important, but quite often we don't put as much attention onto how to fully maximize our CPF savings until maybe it's a bit too late, right? So if you think about it, at age 60, it's about too late already because you can't do much at that point in time.
Yeah. I guess a lot of people know about CPF because every month when you look at your payslip, if you're a Singaporean or PR, you will see some amount of money being deducted, and that's how people first get to know about CPF and what it actually does, because they will go online to research about the scheme. What is less commonly known, I find, at least for my generation, is actually the topic of SRS. So for those of you who are not familiar with SRS, it's basically like a voluntary tax advantage savings plan that's actually offered by the Singapore government. And the catch here is that both foreigners and also PR and Singaporeans, everyone would actually qualify for it. For SRS, there's a cap every year, 15,300 for citizens and PR. And for our foreigner friends, that is actually higher, it's 35,700. So Tim has already explained some of the key benefits of CPF and why you should care about it. So I'll cover the portion on SRS. I find that to neglect SRS as a working adult is really a missed opportunity, because it's actually a chance for you to really be able to reduce the kind of annual taxes that you have to pay, and at the same time to be able to tap on this method to kind of build wealth, which we'll cover quite a bit on later.
Thank you. Gerald?
So I think, like Geraldine shared, when we think about CPF, it's always towards the contribution side. We think about how much our take-home pay will be lower because of the additional CPF contribution. But I think what I try to do is also think about what then do I use the CPF savings to be for, especially when it comes to my retirement planning. And I think why is it very important is because a very big part of our savings actually is within CPF. So if I want to be thinking about how I can maximize my retirement savings, definitely that is the first part that I'll think about how I can optimize it.
Okay, thank you. Great panelists, because they just moderate themselves. They go over what they've already covered, so I don't have to do much. But I think how we're going to take today is we'll take some questions during the panel discussion instead of leaving it for the end. There is a question that has the most number of votes right now, and that's actually about SRS and individuals in lower income tax brackets. Is it worth putting money into SRS for tax savings?
Let me just share. So for those of you who don't know SRS, basically what you do is when you contribute to your SRS account, the amount you contribute is less off from your income tax, your taxable income essentially, right? So if I have a taxable income of 100,000 and I contribute 10K into my SRS for the year, my taxable income becomes 90,000 for the year, right? And of course, for those of you who are fortunate enough to pay income tax, you also know that income tax is progressive, right? So at the top end, you are talking about 20 or 22%. And of course, you know, if you, at the lower end, it's much lower. So the whole idea is that SRS makes more sense to top up as your income becomes higher, right? Because then the tax savings that you enjoy is also greater as compared to someone who is paying lower income tax and they are at a lower tax rate. So, yeah.
Thank you. Anything else you'd like to add from the rest of the panelists?
Yep, I guess Tim is right. You know, it does make sense to perhaps maybe explore SRS as an option a lot more as your income grows. But I would still encourage, young adults in this audience, since there are many young faces here, to still pay attention to this, because you'll be surprised how much, you would be able to enjoy growth in income along with your growth in your skills and marketability, in the first maybe 10, 15 years of your work life.
And for Gerald, I have a special question for you. How can we balance using CPF and SRS effectively to plan for retirement?
Okay, maybe I'll take a step back by just painting the overall picture around how I would think about CPF versus SRS. So I see a very wide range of audience that's here. We've got like audience from 6 all the way to our young seniors. So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Doraemon, the Japanese cartoon. Okay, so effectively, if you know what Doraemon is, effectively this Japanese cartoon that has got a pocket where, depending on the different circumstances, there'll be different tools that will be put up. So that is effectively how I'll think about the different aspects of CPF as well as SRS, in which each of them would effectively be serving a purpose, and I will use them accordingly. Okay, so if I think about CPF ordinary account or OA, that would effectively be the foundation. And as the name suggests, ordinary, that also allows you a broader use of applications, including, say, purchasing a house or being able to apply for BTO. If I think about the SA, that is special. And what it means by special, at least how I'll think about it, is that I'll only think of how it has a certain special use when it comes to the SA money that I've effectively put aside. And then, like they have explained earlier, for SRS, effectively, it is a voluntary scheme, but because it is voluntary, the interest that comes along with whatever you have put aside for the SRS is lower as well, at 0.05%. Okay? So that is effectively how I would differentiate between the CPF OA, SA, as well as SRS scheme. And using that framework, then it becomes easier to understand how I would segregate my investing between the different pots, because effectively for CPF OA, the barrier to investing is much lower, given that you are looking at a 2.5% interest rate for your CPF OA, and the range of investment options that you have will be wider as well. Okay, for SA, because you are getting now 4.04% interest rate, so the bar to investing is a bit higher, and the range of investment options that you have would be more limited as well. Okay, for SRS, it is entirely voluntary. I would think of it as like a step up, because you are wanting to do more for your retirement. You are putting aside even more of your income for your retirement planning needs. But because the interest rate is 0.05%, then you really need to think about what investment options you want to be taking for your SRS money.
Okay, very helpful. Thank you. So maybe this question would be for Tim. What are some practical tips or rules of thumb for someone who wants to start investing in their CPF money? How would you get started if you were to invest?
I think the first thing to just note is that you don't want to start investing your CPF savings, your CPF OA savings in a way that's very different from how you would typically already invest your regular cash, right? I may not be super old yet, I'm in my mid-30s, but I can actually remember when I was young, a lot of the older people around me, so they would be your pioneer generation, young seniors today already, I guess. What they do, and back then, is that a lot of them actually use their CPF OA to invest in stocks, even though they don't typically invest in stocks using their own cash. And the reason for that is simple, right? Because they don't have a lot of cash on hand, hence they don't invest. But then because their CPF OA savings feels like it's just an untapped portion of money that they could easily use to invest / trade / gamble, whatever you want to call it, they deploy it that way. Right, and unfortunately, because most normal people who don't invest will not be very good in stock picking or investing in individual stocks anyway, they end up losing money on their trades. And then that brings the whole cycle of, hey, you got to be very careful when you invest your CPF OA because that's your retirement nest egg and that whole argument there, right? So I would start by saying that, firstly, you should not be investing your CPF money in anything that you wouldn't typically already think about investing your cash for, right? It's an extension of your overall investment strategy, not a different investment strategy. The second thing to note is that CPF savings, when you invest, typically you're looking at a longer term horizon, right? So you obviously cannot make trades. You shouldn't be investing in 3 to 5 year time frame. You want to think about it, in my opinion, 10 to 20 years, because that is for your retirement. So if you are 35 like me, you got 30 years to retire. So, at least you're looking at a 20 years time frame. I think that's generally better. The third thing is, of course, to minimize costs, right? This is very important because a lot of people don't understand, but the thing about CPF returns that makes it so valuable is that you get the return, whether it's 2.5% or 4%, cost-free, meaning that you don't pay anybody to get that return, right? So if you were to invest your CPF savings, you are incurring a cost, a transaction cost, an asset management fee, and you want to make sure that this cost is minimized so that you don't spend more than you need to grow your savings. Otherwise, what's the point of getting a 5% return, but you pay 1% in costs? You may as well just stop, transfer it to your SA, right? So I think that's the three things I would consider.
Very sound advice, thank you. Anybody else would like to add to what Tim said? Or no? Okay. So we can move on to the next question. So this one has also a lot of votes, and so I'll direct it to all three, whoever wants to take it. Do you think the government will clamp down on SA shielding?
Oh.
That's a difficult one, I imagine, but I mean, maybe we can start by explaining.
Should have asked Heng Swee Keat yesterday.
Yeah. Sorry guys, wrong
Where's
panel
Mr. Lu?
for the
Mr. Lu,
question.
yeah. You ask the next panel, Christopher.
Yeah. Maybe we'll skip that one then?
I can explain the shielding.
Okay, sure. Let's explain the shielding.
Okay, so shielding is, I am not a 1M65 expert. I know some of you guys may be. I'm not, but I roughly know what it means, right? So basically, what people want to do is that they don't want their CPF SA to go into their retirement account. So before they turn 55, and the next panel after me can correct me if I'm wrong, they put it somewhere else so that it's not tapped, it's not touched, right? Then after that, they transfer it back. So that is the shielding hack. I guess you could say that it's a workaround, which, the government may or may not like that to be in place. I personally think that, with the SA funds, you're talking about a 4 to 5% return if it goes into your retirement account. So that's actually quite valuable, and I personally would think that, it's, I think we can just let it be currently.
Yeah, okay. Good answer. Hope that answers the question. So maybe for the next one, let's go to Geraldine. Maybe what are some of the myths, for investors in your generation and life stage about CPF investing that you would like to debunk?
Well, there are many myths regarding CPF and a lot of misinformation, but of course, to give them credit as well, the organization has been taking a lot of steps to clarify and simplify a lot of these complicated concepts around the scheme, to really break it down so that, into things like infographics, blog post videos, so that the younger generation is able to digest it better. If I were to point out the most common misconception or myth or misunderstanding of CPF, I would actually think it's the fact that it's being completely ignored or out of picture when it comes to financial planning for many in my generation. So assuming someone is maybe not at a stage of intending to buy a house yet, or perhaps maybe is not someone who actively looks at their finances and their portfolio, there is a tendency among some of my peers to simply not even see CPF as part of that, right? And that's a huge missed opportunity because, as Timothy pointed out earlier, there is a significant sum of money that accumulates, and then with interest it actually grows. And at the same time, while you are young, in your 20s, in your 30s, to not invest that amount of money, be it CPF or SRS, could be a missed opportunity for yourself, especially if there's a huge sum lying there. So just give you an example. SRS interest rate is only 0.05% if you do nothing, right? So that means to say that, you can just count the compound interest at the end of 10 years. That's not going to be very sufficient. Therefore, it's really important to think about, since you have that money sitting there, what are some of the ways in which you can help it to grow faster, and not be suffering at a percentage of 0.05%, because that's really missing out on the potential gains that could have been incurred. Similarly, for CPF itself, 2.5% for ordinary account, that could be good for some people, but I believe that, perhaps as young, educated people, there are so many much more options out there which could help you perhaps maybe accelerate it. So even if it's 1% increase in interest rate, that could really accumulate into a much larger sum over a period of time.
Okay, thank you. That's great.
If I can just add to that, I think basically for a lot of young investors, we may not think long-term enough around our retirement planning, and that probably explains why many people do not think about using their CPF to invest. But on the flip side, we also see that some may think a bit too short-term when it comes to using their CPF money. We interact with a lot of retail investors, and I think one of the most commonly discussed topics in the last 6 months is Singapore Treasury bills. For those who are still not aware what Singapore Treasury bills are, they are MAS issued government bonds that allow you to earn a safe return through this government bond. Okay, so the thing to take note of is if you are actually investing in a treasury bill that may be 6 months or 12 months, and there is no certainty that we are able to get such a high interest rate 6 months or 12 months down the road when the T-bills actually mature. So that's something that we constantly highlight, that while they are relatively safe in terms of being an investment product, you also bear a certain reinvestment risk when you do not think long-term enough for your retirement needs.
That's an excellent point. Thank you. So maybe for the next question, I'll go back to Tim. As a husband and father, a family man, what are your thoughts on how you proportion out different, your CPF funds for different purposes, such as using it to pay for, the down payment for the house, or also for investments for retirement? What's your framework for that?
Yeah, so I think our CPF OA is generally quite valuable for us in fulfilling some of our needs in our life, right? So the first thing that, as I shared earlier, that most people think about is to buy a house. And that's certainly true, whether you're buying your first flat or you're upgrading to a private property. A lot of us would somehow dip into our CPF OA to help with the down payment or the monthly installment. So that's the first need we have. The second need is, of course, our own retirement, right? So we, as much as we want to take some money from our OA to pay for our home, we also need to set aside for our retirement, right? So you have your special account, so that obviously is untouched, that compounds at 4%, but your OA is also forms part of your potential retirement nest egg. And then the third thing is, of course, can you invest the money as well to get a higher return? The way I look at it is that it's not about choosing one over the other. We should strike a balance. I share with you what I do, all right? So for myself, we upgraded to a private property about 2 years ago. So a fair bit of the down payment came from the CPF OA that we have, as well as the monthly installment, right? But what I do is I also keep a significant sum in my CPF OA because I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm always afraid that I'll lose my job, the business will close down. So what happens is that your home monthly installment has to be paid for, right? So I make sure I set aside a couple of years worth of mortgage that can be used to cover the housing installment in the event that I lose my job, right? And I think that's important as a dad because you need to make sure that if anything happens to you or your job or your company, that your family doesn't have to move out within a year, that you have enough money in your OA to still pay for the mortgage. So you want to set that aside as well. In my younger days, what I did, because that was back then when I was still staying my HDB, this was during the MOP period, so I know I was not going to sell the house anytime soon. I actually, for some of the years, I actually transferred my OA to my SA, because what you want is that you want a little bit of a higher return. So I always say that OA 2.5%, SA 4%, right? So if you talk about making your money work hard for you, even within the CPF account itself, not every saving you have is working as hard for you, right? The SA is obviously working harder than the OA. So what I do is if there's excess saving, I transfer it to my SA. And today, what I do as well is that the excess savings I have in my OA, so money that I don't think I need to set aside, or rather, I've already set aside what I need for my monthly installment, but the additional amount money that I have in my OA, what I do is I invest it as well, right? Because you can get higher returns right now from the market. Gerald talked about the T-bills, right? Even the T-bills can give you 3.7%, That is like even Singapore government securities also give you 3.7%. That just means that the 2.5% in our OA, it's good in the past when interest rates were low, but it's not good today when interest rates are much higher, right? So I do invest in it. I do put some of the money in the Endowus CPF portfolio because I also believe that over the next 20, 30 years, it will compound for me. So I would say that there is a good allocation across housing, retirement, which means retirement from the point of view of CPF retirement, as well as investing as well.
Okay.
Maybe I can add
Yeah,
one
sure,
point
please.
about the housing portion, because that kind of resonates with me. When it comes to, using your OA for housing, I guess some property agents would kind of talk about how you can actually, just max out, right? And use everything. However, it's very important to take into consideration also your life circumstances. So Tim is an entrepreneur. For myself, I work in a very volatile industry that is on the news headline for layoffs almost every single week and month. So that's the tech industry, right? And I think that to really max out if you come from a volatile industry is not the wisest thing to do. So what I did, with my property was really to have that kind of margin of safety as well, to be able to tide myself through if in a situation when I was laid off. And earlier this year, I think it was in June or May, I was actually let go as part of the wider company layoffs as well. And having that kind of buffer in the CPF actually provides a huge margin of safety. And that also impacted my interviews, right? Because when I go for job interviews, it's more like, I'm in a very relaxed state because I know that I have a huge runway that I can actually rely on both from emergency funds and also a CPF OA perspective. So do remember margin of safety, and I do not think that is great advice for anyone to just max out their OA deductions when it comes to property purchase.
Yep.
Yeah, so it really depends on which life stage, which industry you're in, your objectives.
Yeah.
So, anything to add, Gerald? Okay, no. So maybe we can go to one of the audience questions again. There are actually a lot of questions. So. This one, if your friend comes to you, so this is for all three of you, if you're comfortable answering, and they said about 70% of people who invest their CPF actually make losses or make less than the OA interest. Does it then make sense to forego this guarantee return? I'm not sure where the 70% is coming from, but that's the question that's being asked.
Most people that I know invest their CPF OA in individual stocks lose money. So in a way, if you're looking at that percentage from that point of view, that they are investing in individual stocks over a time period of, okay, when I say time period, it doesn't mean that they stop investing after that. It could be that they just invest in a stock, then they sell 2 days later, 3 days later, right? But they might do that for many years, right? But the individual holding period is very low. They do lose money, right? It is because they do not take a long-term approach towards investing, which is why that statistics show. The other possibility is that the cost they pay is too high. So in the past, for those of you who are old enough to remember, the rep fee for CPF can be easily more than 1%, right? That means the fee that the financial advisor charge you to manage. Today, the government has kept it at 0.4%. So that is at least a reduction of 0.6, if not more. And that kind of percentage point is very important in determining whether or not you can outperform the market or you can outperform what your CPF SA could have given you.
Thank you. Anything else to add for?
Maybe I will go back to what Tim shared at the start, which is that for many investors who are, say, starting to invest in single stocks, that is something that we just need to be aware about, in that there are actually different investment styles and different investment products depending on your individual lifestyle, your level of knowledge towards investing. And I think that statistic probably reflects that there might be some investors who might be, say, picking single stocks when they might not have the knowledge to do so, when they might not have the time to be monitoring their investment. In which case, I guess with the proliferation of different products in the market today, with the birth of different platforms, you now have a wider range of options that suit your individual lifestyle, risk appetite, and level of knowledge towards investing. So I think even if you realize that you might not be able to pick single stocks by yourself and risk actually making that kind of returns, then you can actually explore other options such as more risk-free or lower risk kind of options or things that doesn't require you to take such an active approach towards making your own investment decisions.
Very good points. Geraldine, you have something to add? Okay. So if I can just summarize what Tim and Gerald said, really it could be that the percentage of people who invested their CPF who actually had losses, they could be invested in something really risky, and they could have a shorter term investment horizon. So as long as you are investing in something that's maybe more in line with your risk tolerance and with a longer investment horizon, you could potentially exceed this OA guaranteed return.
I just
rate of
want to
return.
highlight that in the past, this is 20, 30 years ago, the investment options available for CPF OA is generally more limited and the fees were higher. So it's quite unfair/unfortunate that the older generation, they just didn't have as many options as we have today, for example, robo-advisors. So they had very little options besides, single stocks on the exchange. Even ETFs back then were very, not often, right? I mean, Gerald would probably be more familiar. Yeah, so they actually were investing in a very different climate as where we are today.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully that answers the question. We have a few minutes left, but I'd like to take this time to ask each of you, if you're comfortable sharing, how are you currently invested for retirement? You don't have to say specific products, but more like your asset allocation. How are you thinking about it? Gerald, would you like to start?
Okay, so I think when it comes to retirement planning, it comes down to two things. Number one is to think long term, because effectively we are thinking about what's going to happen 20, 30 years down the road, and it is not something that, like I mentioned earlier, just thinking about whether I'm earning a higher interest rate, 6 months or 12 months, and I think that requires us to sit down and understand what are the different options that allow us to make this return at the point when we are retiring. And then the second point, I guess, is what Tim has already made earlier. It needs to be a low-cost option because this cost actually get compounded over time, and we want to make sure that when we are investing for the long term, it is something that doesn't come with too significant cost. So I think those two would be the key tenets of how I would think about my own retirement planning, and the choice of platform, the products that I'll actually choose would effectively be in line with these two key objectives.
Personally, I'm still trying to figure out this question. In fact, every time I meet someone from the finance space, I'll be asking them, actually, what's the ideal asset allocation that someone of my age and profile should have, right? And then the question I'll get would be more like, oh, it depends on your lifestyle. But here's what I'm doing currently. I have a spreadsheet, and I'm happy to send it to you if you would like a template that I use.
I would
on
like.
Google Sheets. Yeah, and basically every month I track okay, how much is in each of the different bank accounts. Am I invested in for my different investments, and also what's happening in my CPF and all that. So I get a complete dashboard of what is actually happening at that point in time where I log in the data as well. So I guess it's very important to start with measuring, because if you don't measure, you don't know the progress that you are making as well, right? And I also track my net worth every quarter just to see okay, is it trending up, and if it's trending down, then that's kind of a problem that I probably should look into. So I guess start with measurement, and then something else to take note of is also, of course, your lifestyle as well. So I'm very time-starved these days, so therefore I started to take a much more passive approach to investing versus an active one, because stock picking is good if you are great at it, but you just imagine if you invest in one stock, then you need to watch their earnings call and keep updated with what they are doing, and not just them, but also their competitors as well. So that actually takes up a lot of time, right? Assuming you spend 3 hours to study one company, then if you study their competitors, so that will take about 15 hours every month or so. So that's really quite a lot of time. So I don't really have that luxury, and therefore I've actually chosen a much more passive option, for example, funds, private debt, and all. Yeah.
Okay.
For me, I just like to have different paths to success. So I have this thought, which is that I don't need all the paths to work. I just need 1 or 2 to work, and I'm okay for my retirement. So the different path of success is my CPF. So I make it a point to keep money in my CPF, top up my SA whenever I can as well. I also invest via robo portfolios, because I also have the time to look at my investments, but I don't want to do all of it my own. So I also use the robo portfolios as well. I also invest in individual stocks and ETFs because hand itchy sometimes. You read too much, you also want to invest, and you think you know something the market don't, right? Property is always a play for us in Singapore, and for me, there is a strategy as well there. And then lastly, of course, business building lah. So, investing in my own businesses or looking at other investment opportunities within the business world. So like I say, I don't need all of it to work. I just need one or two to work. That's good enough, right? So I try to have different path to success.
Thank you. Very interesting. Different strokes for different folks. We're almost at time, so I guess, yeah. So I think that's it. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for joining us today.